Alright gang, we talked about the manifest, the Android manifest file, the strings.xml. We talked about creating the class for the items activity and the associated XML file, activity items. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the activity item.xml file, which is being passed, which is right here. We talked about the previous one, which is the list, the splash screen, if you will, or the first screen the user comes to, and that's this. Clicks on it, and now we're going to the activity item right there that looks like that. This is the generic version of it. Let's go to the, first of all, let's go to the XML here. I'm going to, I had some comments there. Let me do this. Okay. And start here. So I put in here in comments that we're going to use the scroll view to make sure the user can spell that right. The user can scroll if the item is too long to fit on the screen. So again, this is the activity item. So that's this. But the user can still scroll if there's too much information. Alright, so we're going to use the scroll view, and that's going to be in a vertical orientation. So that's that. Here's the end of that. I just have some comments here myself from a previous mobile app that I did. I just put that in comments to do some comparisons. But we're using the scroll view here. There's the end scroll view. And then inside of that, we're using a linear layout with the vertical orientation. So here is the scroll view, and again, orientation is vertical, and from there we're using a linear layout with vertical orientation to display 4 text view widgets. So here's linear layout. It's going to be orientation is vertical, and let's go through these widgets. Can I get them all? Yes. Let me try to do this right here. So there we go. Okay. Oops. Try that one more time. There are all 4 right there. Okay. So here's the first text view. And this is the item title. Here is the second one for the publication date. Notice put some text there just for demo purposes, as you could see here, like this, right, for demo purposes, which is going to change dynamically when the user actually pulls one of the RSS feed items. The third text view is a description. So looking at here, we have the title, we have the date, what's known as a pub date, we have the description, and then we have the read more, which is right here, the last text view right here. Okay? And then the end of the layout. Notice we made the color blue, and so it's imitating a link, but that's not really a link. We just make it blue because by convention people will think that it's a link, and they click on it and it goes to the actual URL. We'll show you how that works though, but really in reality we're just giving the impression that this is a link by making it the color blue. Okay, and the linear layout and end the scroll view right here. Okay, that is the code for that. So that's all this code right here. These are just comments you don't have to worry about. Okay, so that's the activity item, and the class for that is item activity. So let's go here, make this a little bit larger, and so we can see through the code. I'm going to try to go through this a little bit more quickly. Here's our package. Here's our import statements. We've seen similar to these before. We're using an intent here, again, to pass that intent to a URL. Here we're having implementing the view.onClick listener. And again, you can put this all in one line. I could do the same thing here with the items activity, which I showed on 2 lines, but I could also do this for the items activity, do this, put it all on one line like that. Okay, going back to item activity. So there's, again, package, imports, start to class. It's called item activity right here. Okay, and we're going to override on create like we normally do when we're in our mobile app. We override the on create method. Super.onCreate, and we're going to use the passing the saved instant state value, and then we're going to set the content of the activity item. Now, as you know, what this refers to is the actual activity item right here, the actual XML file. That's what that refers to, right? It's in the res folder, and it is in layout. R stands for res and layout. So we're just going through that r.layout.activity item right here. Okay, we're showing again the launcher icon. We're getting references to the 4 widgets, text view, all 4 text views, and then we're getting the intent right here, get intent. We're going to get the data from the intent. So instead of put, we're using a get. Get string extra pub date, get string extra title, get string extra description. With description, we're going to replace any new line characters. That's what that means, a \n, with a space. So if there's a new line character, we're going to replace that with a space. Okay, so again, string pub date, title, description. We're going to display the data on the widgets. Here are the variables, pub date, title, and description, and we're going to display those by setting the widgets for pub date, title, and description. We're going to set the listener, set onClick listener this. Notice that link text view, right? It's right here, link text view. That's what we're creating here, a link text view. And it's just a text view object right here, but we're calling it link. All this is just a regular text view, but we're calling it link text view. And then we're going to pass that set on click listener. So as soon as that is clicked, we're setting the listener. When that's clicked, we're going to then pass this to the next intent. And so here we go. Override method on click. The get intent, we're calling it intent right here. And all we're doing is getting the URL for the link. Well, really it's a URI. We're calling that variable link. And then we're using the parse method for that particular URL, or URI if you want, and putting into this variable, view URI. And then what happens is that when we get this new intent, here it's going to be for the view the URI using the action view. What that action view is for is that it's going to display it in the default browser of that particular mobile device. So create the intent and start it. Now this again is an implicit intent. Now this implicit intent again is going to take that URL that is being passed from the RSS feed, and then open up a default browser to display that. And again, this is an implicit intent here. Okay, start activity, and that activity is just opening up a default browser. Alright, gang, that's the end of this class here, item activity. Okay, again, stopping it here. Here's our class. Stopping here after the widgets. Getting an intent for the to be able to get those values from the previous activity. And then what we're going to then do is, as mentioned, get the data, get the values here, and display the data on the widgets like this. Display the data, and then we could pass that data, or I should say the URL, pass the URL to the link that's on by read more. And here is the link text view. Set on click listener, and then when it's on clicked, when the user clicks it, it's going to get that URI and use the default browser. Okay, so we've got the activity item, activity items. Let's go to the list view item. I'm going to open that up, and here again there's only two widgets, and we're going to use a linear layout with a vertical orientation, and again, this is the list view item. It doesn't have a class associated with it, and here is the end element right here, and the two text views are right here. So one text view and for the pub date, and another text view for the title. Okay, and that's for the individual. By the way, that's for the individual pub date and title. Now, notice the difference here. These are for the list of items, and this is for the individual pub date and title for each individual item. Okay, that's that. So list view item, that's this file right here. We can right click on that and create a XML file. Now the other ones that I didn't cover are file IO. I covered item activity, items activity. I'm gonna do I'll do file IO right now, and then we'll go do the RSS feed handler, and the RSS item. So let me do the file IO class. Now here is, I'm going to open up this import. Here is where you can actually put your URL in for the RSS feed, right here. Okay. Notice one I have, the CNN the latest news feed. Excuse me, which is a combination of different topics. So going to the top of the file, there's our package. Here's our imports, input stream, output stream, and because we're using input output, we're going to have IO exception, and the so file input, file output, and then an input stream coming in. That's the RSS feed itself, and then we're going to parse the URL, and we could use various tools to parse that. One tool that we can use to parse Java objects is what's known as SAX, and again that stands for Simple API for XML, and we could parse the XML into a series of Java objects. So here's our SAX parser, SAX parser factory, the import source, the XML reader, and when you start coding this, it will ask you if you want. It'll say that you don't have this import statement, you need it, and you just click OK. And the utility log as well too. So when we see downloads, we can actually view that in the log area. A little thing here. This is what's known as Java.comments, gang, and I'm not going to get into it right now, but the Java.comments start with a / and 2 asterisks rather than a / asterisk, and it's good for using documentation. You can actually, excuse me, create a Java doc, and it will give information about the methods, their return type, number of parameters used, the parameter types, etc. And so you could use that Java doc that shows up in your class. This class is file IO. We have two constants using the final keyword. One is going to be the URL underscore string constant, and another one's going to be the file name constant. The URL string is what you got to go searching for, and that is an RSS feed. Just do an internet search on RSS feeds. Please do not use this one. You'll have to use your own. Find your own, maybe ESPN or something that you find interesting, and see if it will work with this application. If you want to test it with this, you're more than welcome to do that, but I don't want you using it because this RSS feed will work, but I don't want you using it for your application. You're going to have to find your own RSS feed. And then here's a file that actually stores the RSS feed before we read it and parse it into Java objects and then actually read it. So we're going to store the RSS feed into this XML file and then parse it. Okay, let's see. Let me do this. Okay. So what is context? It's an abstract class which allows to access to application-specific resources and classes. Also, it allows for calls for application operations. For instance, launching an activity. You can use the context, or broadcasting and receiving intents, either explicit or implicit intents. And I'm going to show this. Yeah, I'm going to cut this out and put it here so you can see that. So the context, here, this variable context, is going to be used for the app, and here we can use it for both the download file and the read file methods. Alright, so here's our class, file IO, and now you know that when you have a method with the same name as a class, you know it's a constructor. And so this is a constructor that accepts one parameter, and that one parameter is a context parameter. Here's the context class. This is the name of the parameter context, and it's going to pass the context to the private variable here, which is context, right? You want to use constructors to initialize your private data members. Now, these private data members are constants, so they have to be initialized. But our private data member here, context, we're going to use to actually set that with this constructor, file IO. Here's our first method, download file, and here's the code here. So I'm going to go through all the code here actually. It's the end of it is right here. That's our download file. We're going to put in a try catch block in case it creates an error. We're going to get the URL using that constant, get the input stream. We're going to open up an input stream and get the also get the output stream where we want to put it. By the way, I want to talk a little bit about this output stream and what mode private means. Excuse me. All mode private means is that you are only going to allow the current app to work with files, with the file that's being used and no other files. So it allows the current app to work with the file that we are currently using. And the file that we're currently using is this one right here. news_feed.xml. That's the variable name, file name, right here. And there's the variable right here. And the mode private is going to only allow the current app to work with the file news_feed.xml and no other files. Okay, what else? Again, here is the method download file. We're going to read the input and write output. We're going to create a byte array called buffer and the new byte is going to be have a size of 1024 1024 bytes, and we can read the buffer into that byte array, and then while the byte reads is not equal to -1, in other words, it's a valid number, we're going to put it to the, we're going to write it out to the buffer, and then we're going to use the input stream. Is here. Here's the in variable. Here's the file output stream. So here's the input stream. Here's the file output stream. So we're going to read that, and it's going to go to the while it's not -1, it's going to go to the output, the file output stream, and read then next it's going to read another value. So while the bytes read is not -1, in other words, there's still data coming in, it's going to write it to the output stream, and then remember, all loops need initializing, testing, and updating. This is going to update it. So if there's more data, it's going to write it to the output file stream called out. If not, it's going to end the while loop, close the file output stream, close the input stream. If there's any errors, we're going to indicate them to the to log view, and then end that particular method right here. The RSS feed, the read file, is right here. Here's the read file that we're going to be using, similar to the download file. What we're going to do here is we're going to instantiate use the class RSS feed and the read file method. And what we're going to do is use SAX, right? Simple API for XML, and we're going to read that, get the XML reader using that SAX parser factory. The parser, some of these are a little obscure commands here, gang, but all we're trying to do here is just get the XML reader, and then we're going to pull that file in and read the XML from that RSS feed that we got on the internet. We're going to set the content handler using the RSS feed handler class and the XML reader that we created here from this XML reader class, and we're going to use that XML reader object variable and use a set content handler method, and then we're going to pass this RSS handler. Next, we're going to read the file from the internal storage. In other words, this file that we created right here, and using the input and file output, that we put the output to this file, news_feed.xml. That's going to be a local file now. We're going to read the file from internal storage. Here's our news. This is the file that's being read, is this one right here, newsfeed.xml, which is now on our phone. And then we're going to parse the data individually to get the title, date, description, and we're going to parse that, and then we're going to set the feed in the activity, and then get the feed and then return it to the activity that's reading it. So, in other words, you're using an RSS link. You're then pulling in the RSS feed, you're, in other words, reading it from the internet, you're writing the data to an XML file, then you're reading and parsing the XML into Java objects so that it can be positioned in these various widgets in your application. And we're almost finished here. Finally, we're setting the feed in the activity. And almost finished with this try block, which is right here. Now, notice this is a value returning method, because the method here is called read file. It's a value returning method, and the value that must be returned is an RSS feed. It's of type RSS feed. As you can see, we actually have a RSS feed class. Let's see, where is that? I should do the, well, here's the class itself. Okay, it's of type RSS. So I've just, instead of using an int, float, double, etc. string, we're saying that this RSS, it's going to be a value returning method, read file, and we're going to pass this variable feed must be right here this variable, it must be an RSS type, RSS feed type, because we're saying that this value returning method is must return an RSS feed. And in fact, it does after it uses the RSS handler, which is right here. And that is going to get the feed. And then we're going to pass that back to the calling environment when whatever calls this read file method. Finally, we're going to use a catch method right here, and if there's an error, it's going to go to the log view and indicate that it was a newsreader, and what that error is. E.toString is going to return the error that it was generated. Okay, gang, that is it. And we're going to come back to another video and try to finish this up. All right, see you in the next video.